Josh. Josh loves drumming. When he's not practicing, he's performing. And when he's not performing, he's practicing. Oh, and did we mention? Josh loves drumming. And that's why he chooses D-Bud. Hey Josh, show us your skills. Thanks, Josh. Noise harms your health. Josh knows that. He also knows that gigs get very loud. D-Bud's volume slider means that he can slide from minus 11 decibels to minus 24 decibels in the flick of a switch. And that's why Josh loves D-Bud. The problem with cheap earplugs is they often kill both the volume and the sound. The lower tones cut through the earplugs more than the higher ones. The bass overpowers the treble. There's an uneven attenuation of high and low frequencies, an unbalanced distorted sound. Yes, they protect your ears, but you get a muffled and dull sound experience. D-Bud isn't like that. Don't lose your hearing or peace of mind. Get D-Bud today.
It was my dad. My dad played a number of musical instruments just for fun, and I was given a harmonica at the age of 2, and I was deadly serious about it from the word go. My mother says I was playing tunes from the word 2. I think she's got a poor memory there. That's not possible. But I know what I was doing at that time. I was trying to isolate notes individually. So the same little tune I used to play over and over again was trying to isolate the notes and then gradually moving away from those low notes up the scale, and by the time I was about 3 or 4, I had some tunes. So I was just doing what my dad did. You know, it's very natural for kids. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree.
And when did you kind of get into listening to music and becoming a fan of music in that sense?
Well, I did like to listen to music on the radio. I was playing harmonica for many years before guitar, and I was playing chromatic, and so it meant that you had all the notes. And then when I was about 12, I probably started buying records a little bit earlier than that. When I was about 9, I was buying Shadows records from the word go. And then by the time I was 12, again, the influence of my dad, he had a guitar which was far too big for me, with a brutal action, big country thing. And I started playing that, messing around with it from about the age of 12, but then really serious once I reached the age of 14. I was finally big enough to play some chords on the thing.
And did you take to guitar, you know, pretty naturally? Obviously, you know, it seems like you were made for the guitar now, but at the time when you first started playing it, how quickly did you pick it up, and how did you go about picking it up initially?
Well, I knew that I wanted to be a self-taught player. It was an alternative to school where you would be graded for everything that you did. This was something that I could teach myself. It was an absolute passion. I could learn from every other guitarist who was doing anything vaguely interesting, either on record or watching them. So I moved on from the Shadows to the Stones. Lots of blues guitarists were important to me. Eric Clapton, Jeff Beck, Peter Green, the late great Peter Green. And I started listening to Segovia when I was 15. I remember hearing Segovia plays Bach and thinking, this is wonderful, miraculous music. How can it be done on one guitar in one go? How can anyone be that good? And I thought maybe I could take on board an influence of it. And first of all, I was trying to do it with a plectrum, with a pick. And that sort of stuff doesn't really work until you're using the fingers. So over time, I reluctantly started incorporating the fingers to be able to do all this complicated stuff. And it meant that with classical stuff, the left hand had to do much less work because the right hand was picking out lots of notes, sometimes when the left hand is in a fixed position. And that's something I learned from watching Segovia.
And from that point of developing your playing, you know, were you kind of practicing, like, how many hours a day would you say you were playing guitar? Or did it ever feel like you were working towards something? Were you highly ambitious, or were you literally just playing for the pleasure of it initially?
First of all, I was playing for pleasure, but I was so deadly serious about it that when I got home from school every day, I probably did a cursory amount of homework, but the real work started when I picked up the guitar. That was when I was really working hard on something. And that continued when I left school at 16 and started doing some very basic jobs. The real work would start always when I got home and when I started practicing with a band that I've been trying to form for years. Yes, it all became more and more serious, and I realized that I was going to have to work very, very hard to get into a band and try and make a living at it. So I think there are various stages in the life of a professional musician. First of all, it's all a bit of a dream, and I think, oh, isn't it great? I can play 3 chords, wonderful, and that can be very thrilling on a personal level. And then once professional horizons set in, the playing itself starts to change. You become more competitive, you try harder. Perhaps the level of joy at being able to do salvos and carry off guitar miracles, I think the pleasure is never quite the same as when you're just playing those 3 basic chords that you learn first of all. As I'm sure every musician knows, that you start off with passion and end up with technique. Now the passion, you have to put that back into it, and I think the passion comes out of writing something that you think is good enough for other people to do. And I think it comes down to that. If the ideas stick in playing, it's like jumping through hoops, and it can be marvelous. You think, oh, I managed to do that. That's great, wonderful, yes. But the real work, it's probably in the writing. It's in the imagination. The big instrument is the brain, perhaps the heart.
Yeah, that's the point. You know, people can learn technique and get very, very good, but it's the heart and soul that you put into it. It's the songwriting. It's that kind of, you know, special ingredient that people can put in, injecting their personality into something that otherwise can be quite a functional skill and less artistic.
Yes, you're quite right. And obviously, you know, those who have had music lessons and learned to jump through hoops at a very young age, and thinking about, you know, young piano players who are learning to play Beethoven when they're 7 and 8 years old, you know, much like classical ballet dancers, you know, the muscles have got to form, the whole muscle memory thing is kicking in. I guess for people who go their own way, who are prepared to make their own mistakes, at the same time their own discoveries, we bypass the stage of having our wrists slapped because we are doing it incorrectly, and in so doing, I think, can sometimes develop new techniques, new ways of doing things. So I'm very happy that I managed to do a few things that other people picked up on, and they became part of the glossary of terms for guitarists, whether that was sweep picking or tapping, or other things that I have that I would love to be able to share with people and say that you know, there is this thing you can do as well. You might not think of this. It's like, how the hell is that done? How the hell is that sound possible? And I'm thinking of the acoustic instrument, where you would think that it's all been done and it's just a variation on a theme. Well, it isn't. It is actually still all limitless, and people are surprising me all the time with what they manage with the instrument. And so you pit yourself against it, but it's always a thrill to reach a new milestone.
Yeah, because the guitar tapping, it's quite interesting that some people attribute this to Van Halen, right? To Eddie Van Halen.
Yeah.
But he himself has sort of said that when he went to a Genesis gig in the mid 70s, he sort of saw you doing it and got it from you. Did you ever discuss that with him?
No, I never got to meet him, which is a great shame, because I think he was a great player and a great loss to the world of music. The fact that he's passed so early. I think any technique is a means to an end, and of course it's always wonderful when a world-class player cites you as an influence. And in some cases, I've gotten to work with people who said I've influenced them, such as Brian May. And I had no idea that I'd been an influence on him. And what an extraordinary, terrific player he is. We got to work on a couple of projects together, which was great fun. There are others of distinction that I haven't met, and I certainly hope I do at some point hook up with these people who are no slouch in their own right.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, what an amazing thing to have influenced so many greats, all-time greats, to have actually been an influence to these guys.
It's funny that, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, nobody starts out with that intention. You're just doing what you do. It's a bit of a sort of, each one of us is a research and development thing going on in our own way.
Yeah, and so I just wanted for the people who, I mean, a lot of my listeners are going to be hugely knowledgeable about your career, about Genesis, about your solo career. But for those people who are less familiar, and particularly with your path to joining Genesis, is it a misconception to say that you joined following placing an ad in the Melody Maker? Is that how you got connected with the guys in the band?
Yeah. For 5 years, I'd been advertising myself in the back pages of Melody Maker, and I must have been hundreds of musicians, but nothing seemed to quite gel. At that point, I had no experience really of live gigs. I'd done a handful of semi-pro things. I had no idea what's a sound mixer, what's a manager, what's a record company, what's this. I was just, my head was buried in the sand, just getting on with music, really. And of course, Genesis were further on. They were up and running. They were doing gigs. They were writing songs. They were doing all the things that I aspired to do. But the fact that I advertised myself as a writer, even though everything was in the aspiration to do so rather than achievement, I was talking about myself like I'd done it all. And I guess it's a little bit faking it to make it. The intention was there. And Peter Gabriel gave me a call, and I was very lucky. But then again, you have to ask yourself, this was the culmination of 5 years of ads. And I expect if it hadn't happened in the next 40 years, 45 years later, I would have been advertising myself in the back pages of whatever was going, or doing it another way as the technology changed. Melody Maker has now folded, but many great British bands were formed off the back pages of Melody Maker. I believe John Paul Jones joining Zeppelin was just such a thing. I believe I worked a little bit with him. And he told the story of, he said, I've heard that Jimmy Page, and he's looking for a bass player at the moment. He's forming a band. And he said to his wife, he's probably already got a bass player. And she said, well, why don't you give him a call anyway? What a world's turn on such.
Yeah.
Something as basic as that. So it's the it's the Woody Allen idea, isn't it? You know, that 80 or 90% of success is just showing up or making the call. Do push yourself forward, because without that, you must keep knocking on doors. The audition never really stops, does it?
Yeah, that's so true. And you know, you just mentioned another example of that kind of happenstance. Of course, you know, Elton John and Bernie Taupin, they met in NME, and there are
Yes.
countless examples. You know, even John and Paul meeting each other at some kind of, I think it was at a Village Fete, wasn't it? I mean, all this luck, all the time, all this happenstance. And some of these magazines, you know, have gone out of print. You know, NME's gone out of print. They've still got the online thing. Melody Maker, you said, folded. And a question that I've been posing to people recently is, you know, with Q out of print, with NME out of print, is rock and roll as it was known dead? And then a second part of that question is, you know, do you listen to much music that's in the charts these days?
Well, I think that music is like medicine. Medicine should never go out of fashion. It has magic properties to cure and heal and to re-energize. And music does things that politics can't do or won't do. Politicians seem to drive people apart. Music brings them together. We've got a couple of people on this album whose nations were at war with each other. When I was making the album, Azerbaijan and Armenia. But you know, I cannot see music which was a force for such world-changing events. How can that possibly go out of fashion? If you think about everything that the Beatles did, the stuff that Dylan did, the serious stuff, Buffy St. Marie, Peter Gabriel, my old mate in Genesis, doing Biko, and the album becomes so powerful and influential that it means that apartheid itself becomes unhip. These are world-changing events, and funnily enough, it was a very strange thing went on. Marillion were playing in Berlin just before the wall came down, and Fish was the singer at the time. And they were doing this concert by the wall, and he said something in typically Fish-like fashion. Why, you know, that shouldn't be there. Why don't you just tear the effing thing down? And a couple of weeks later, it happened. So what did rock and roll's, you know, what was rock and roll's part in changing world events? And you have to say that, okay, well, it's not going to cure famine and hunger and put a man on the moon again, but somehow it speaks for the people, the zeitgeist. And I think it's hugely important, whether it's rock and roll or whether it's some other form. I don't know. I've always had a pan-genre approach. I don't have any prejudice against any musical form, whether it's blues or baroque or jazz, rock and pop, you name it. As the old adage goes, there's only, you know, two kinds of music, and
yeah,
that's great and not so great. So do I listen to current stuff? I usually find what's in the charts quite depressing. On the other hand, I do like Joe Bonamassa a lot. I like his reinvigoration of the blues very much. I enjoy Muse, and I enjoy Elbow, and some of these guys I've befriended, and that's great fun for me. So if I see or hear something that I think is really good, I'll say so. I'm not so competitive. I won't say that. You know, I think praise where praise is due, and I don't think it's over for music at all. Not at all. I've been very lucky. This acoustic album, orchestral acoustic album, has gone into the charts here. I just heard today, but on Saturday it went in at number 5 in the national charts. Never mind the the classic.
Wow, that's incredible.
But today it's gone to number 7 in the midweek. So 5 in the midweek Saturday, on to number 7 today. It might go to number 1003 by the time the weekly positions come out. But
Wow.
the company weren't expecting it. My team weren't expecting it. Roger King wasn't expecting it. I phoned him up a couple of minutes ago and said to him, just heard the album's done this. So
Well, you'll have a top 10 on your hands, that's for sure. It's not gonna
well,
out of the top 10.
who knows? It's a very strange thing.
That's
It's not the sort of album that was going to set the world alight, everyone was saying. But there you are,
doing remarkably well. So it's called Under a Mediterranean Sky, right?
That's right, yes. And it seems to have taken off. It seems to have not just had legs but wings already. So I'm thrilled that this type of very personal album.
Yeah, it's
such a big way.
It's a fantastic album. When did you record this, and what is the story behind it?
We recorded it a couple of months. It took a couple of months. I seem to remember that we finished it in. I think we started in. Was it late March, and we finished it by early June, something like that. It didn't take forever. 2 tracks were already recorded, and then we altered them slightly. Came up with an intro for one, and then the other one was remixed, and what have you. The story behind it is, my wife Jo said, if you want to do an acoustic album next, you really should try and broaden it and give it a story, give it a concept. And she said, you like Middle Eastern music, you like visiting the Middle East. We've been so impressed with places we've been to, on our kind of Indiana Jones trips. And we've had some pretty hairy ones, believe me. It's been extraordinary, the places we visited in recent times. But the lure of the desert and the monuments that are still there that look like they were just built yesterday or were freshly painted last week, things that are in mint condition, you come away with this incredible thing. I come away with a notepad full of musical ideas, and I went to work on that. On the track Sirocco, for instance, a 3rd track on the album, which is arguably my favorite, just to evoke once more being in Egypt and seeing ancient Egypt in all its glory, and it's all damn well still there. What an extraordinary thing that is. So it's a bit of a love letter to all those places. So Under a Mediterranean Sky, thanks to Joe's ideas, we broadened it to the point where we were doing musical landscapes, trying to describe these places. So something that was in a typically Middle Eastern style, something that was in a Greek style, something that was in a Turkish style, Spanish, French, and that's just for starters.
Yeah, it's a great concept, and there was some kind of, I felt a great sense of escapism when I was listening to it. It really was. It was, a great source of comfort and enjoyment, especially during this time. And I just wanted to ask, where did you record it? Was this recorded during the lockdown and stuff like that?
Yes, yeah, it was recorded at home in the living room in the lockdown. Studios these days are the size of one's computer.
Yeah,
we're talking to each other on at the moment. My great friend Stephen Wilson says his studio is his computer. The rest of the space is purely optional. It's been wonderful doing that. Yes, we just stuck a mic up and a carpet in front of the guitar and went at it hammer and tongs, and it ended up being a beautiful sound. This is the sound I've been looking for ages with this type of album. I thought that Roger got a wonderful sound, just the right amount of top and bottom, gentle enough, but there was enough clarity that you could hear, just about every note, and that's not easy to do with nylon guitar. We've been trying this for years, but I guess he was using the right kind of compressors and reverbs, and we agonize over this. We negotiate every note, whether it's the orchestrations or not. We do this stuff side by side. Joe contributes melodies, and as I say, the overall concept was hers, and it did broaden it, and it also took the pressure off having to be the central focus of it. So at times the guitar is just playing a very gentle accompaniment to other things that are going on, and I can let the orchestra take it on their own. So, you know, that worked out very, very well.
Yeah, it really did. And congratulations on the huge success of Under a Mediterranean Sky. I'd recommend the album really strongly to all my listeners. And Steve, it was an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. I know you've got to get to your next interview, so thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Tom. It was really great talking to you. Thank you.
If you're enjoying the Greatest Music of All Time podcast, you can keep up to date with all of our latest episodes for free by subscribing. If you're watching on YouTube, the subscribe button is located at the top of the Tom Cridland YouTube page. It's also at the bottom right of any video that you watch on YouTube. If you're listening on an audio platform, such as Spotify or Apple Podcasts, you can subscribe at the top of the page.